Lauper is one of the biggest music icons of the 1980s, and she's celebrating 40 years in the music business with a farewell tour and a new documentary on her life. Of course, we have to bring in friend of the show, James Rodriguez, host of the original Down with James Rodriguez. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me back. I love our chats. Our chats are oftentimes so long. I'm like, you have to do the editing. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, but this is like a fascinating time because I feel older and old at the same time because all my favorite artists that I want to go see are all doing their celebration tours, their farewell tours. Like they're not, but it's a
hmm
great they're kind of doing this moment because sometimes so many people have, oh, I wish I could have seen them one more time, or I wish they would have put on one more performance. Especially with the documentary. I mean, this is just really Cindy's time to shine.
I think so. And I think what's great is so many of these artists post 2020, I think early on, and you and I have followed music forever, where so many of those artists early on, those big hits that they have, they don't like revisiting them right away. They become kind of annoyed as they're like, you're just, girls just want to have fun, girl. You know what I mean? Like they put it to the
Yeah.
side. But then years later, they start realizing the importance of that music in there. So it's fun for us to be able to have these artists that are still performing, giving us amazing performances but also acknowledging this might be the last time, or they say this is the Cher, Elton John, all of them. This is the last time, and then until next time. But I think what's great is that they can look back at their career, and during the pandemic, so many of us went back to the old albums and really got to revisit these and realize these songs are still so good now as they were back in the 80s. These artists are still making music, and many of the icons that you and I follow, that we follow, are such huge icons in the LGBTQI community that I think it's great that we get to celebrate with them amongst so many different generations of people. Because that's what gets overlooked with Cyndi Lauper. It's not just the people that knew her in the 80s. There are so many people that have learned about her throughout her time, which is bravo to her.
I mean, also too, when I think of, 2023, 2024, is if you're going to a wedding, if you're, at a grocery store, you're hearing these songs. If you are at a retro themed party, and even with Nicki Minaj sampling "Girls Just Want to
Mhm.
Have Fun," it brings it to the forefront because especially those younger kids that didn't grow up with Cyndi Lauper, it's like, oh, what is the song that Nicki is sampling? I want to go back and listen to it, and then kind of get to discover her discography.
And what's great is that then when you see who Cyndi Lauper was early on, then you go, I get why Nicki Minaj, who herself always talks about being over the top and just rambunctious and kind of her own lane. And I think that's awesome. And I do love the nod to them. I also love when artists will bring out the other artists during a performance. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That to me is like, that's iconic in allowing those icons themselves to get the love from a new generation of fans, but also these other artists that have made a lane for themselves. And I think, Nikki doing that made the most sense. It worked, and it just seemed genuine that this was an organic thing that she decided to do.
And speaking of Girls Just Want to Have Fun, from Let the Canary Sing, which is the documentary on Paramount Plus, I got to learn it was a cover and it wasn't initially successful when it hit radio.
Mm-mm. No, and this is one of those things that everyone just assumes, well, if it's this huge song, it had to have been huge right off the bat. Many of these songs in general that we think are huge, when you actually go back and look through the archives, like when I'm going through radio magazines and all these, it's like, ooh, nowadays, after that month of it being out, the label would have dropped her.
Yeah.
There was no pickup. And but that is also what made these artists so great in the 80s. We had time to, this gestation period of getting to know them and finding the audience. And I think that's what she did because everyone's like, what is this sound we're hearing? What is this?
Yeah.
Do I like it? Do I not? And then listening to it a couple of times, you're like, you know what? I'm into this. And then when it finally took off, when the whole marketing changed, when they decided, let's just go this way, it became what we know as being this huge hit, but it wasn't a huge hit overnight.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, obviously the promotion that she did with Captain Lou, pretending to be her manager, who plays her dad in the Girls Just Want to Have Fun video. They went on this whole crazy, wacky press tour, which, if you watch the documentary, you'll just see just how insane it was, but it also brought attention to her. Like, who is this woman? How is that really her, her manager? And then it just kind of snowballing from there and people discovering the album.
Which I just thought was that's and one of those things that I thought was it could not have been planned that way before the album came out. Like they were pivoting as the song was out, and I was just like, this is where that kind of guerrilla marketing is, where they just said, you know what? let's just go for this. And they did, and it was so weird that it worked. Because if you would say nowadays we're gonna put artist A with, this wrestler or doing this thing, you're like, wait, what? Then you were just like, okay, you know what I mean? Let's go with it. Because in the 80's, you had a lot of that cross-pollination between wrestling, which is a form of entertainment, and singing,
Yeah.
and being able to get an iconic guy involved with this and doing the whole tour where it wasn't just a one-off thing. It wasn't like the VMA is a one night only. This is like they did several things together, and it warmed my heart because it was so ridiculous in the best way possible. And it was like her debutante ball. It was like her quinceañera. She was coming out to the world, and she's like, this is what I am. You're not going to get this Broadway, performance out of me, and you're not going to get this Motown kind of thing. I'm my own lane, doing my own thing, and it worked. And she found a market that was being underserved for any female artist specifically in that arena.
Yeah, I mean, because you think of like that brought attention to her, and also Madonna at the MTV, awards rolling around in the dress. People talked about that, and it was those moments that people probably discovered. Now those moments happen on social media, but on television and through these different press tours is how it happened in the 80's.
Hmm. Well, and even like that Madonna moment where Madonna even says the reason why she ended up on the floor is because she was like she tripped and she's like, let me just go with it. That could not have been planned, and I think that's what makes it even just a more exciting moment because it wasn't so planned. Because if she's like, oh, I need to drop here on this 4 count or something, I think you'd be like, oh, great. You know what I mean? Like just an easy thing. But when these things happen, it was so organic and it was different. No one else was doing that. Like Madonna writhing around in a wedding dress on public television, you know what I mean? Or access to public television.
Yeah.
And then Cyndi Lauper just going, people are like, wait, wrestling? Wait, we know him. Who's who's she? How does this connect? And it works. And it worked.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see music and sports come together until we saw Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift, but they're not. Um, let's talk a little bit about time after time, because if you grew up in the 80's, that was one of those like, you know, requisite slow dances that you did at prom, when you were out, when you were holding hands at the roller skating rink. If you grew up in the 90's, Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, when they did the whole dance to it, is when you remember that song. Um, Talk a little bit about the impact of that, because going from something so like danceable to this, incredible ballad.
Well, and this is what I think was smart because if she did a Girls Just Want to Have Part Two, if she just redid it, people would be like, so she just has one thing to offer us. We enjoyed that, but the second version of that is not great. And in this time of MTV, because MTV huge for all of these artists,
Yeah,
MTV was playing, hair metal bands, rock bands, rap, all of these different genres are all being played on the same station. And so you were allowed to play a little bit more with like the color palette. Cyndi Lauper following up such a huge dance song to come with this ballad, this completely different. It also showed the world that she was more than just this pop fun song. And the original song wasn't her own. She did not write her debut single.
yeah,
So then when you jump forward to look at the rest of the album, you go, okay, this is where getting a little bit more insight into who she is. And I think she created a song that at that moment took off because ballads were doing well by anybody. If you look at these, specifically 80's artists and even just say specifically 80's female artists, you had Madonna, Janet Jackson, you had all of these artists, Cyndi Lauper, where they were giving you the kind of dance floor songs, but also the ballads. Because then the ballads could be played on the adult contemporary. Ballads could be played on a night. They could be played at prom. They could be played at weddings. It's a marketing move that makes sense, but it also allowed her the versatility to show us how versatile she is in that. And I think it was a smart decision. And it's one of, the greatest and most well-known ballads. And when they explain the story about how the lyrics came to be, it's kind of lyrics come from anything, which is amazing.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's also one of those like things too, is that when I look at her as an artist and the songs that I love from her, I almost compare her to like a Whitney Houston, because I love Whitney Houston's fast songs as much as her
Mhm.
slow songs. Like her ballads and her dance tracks, I feel like equally the same way I feel about Cindy's music as I feel about Whitney's.
100%. And I think that was also at a time where if you look at when the album came out, She's So Unusual 83, you look at all these artists, they were putting out albums like almost every other year or every 2 years, every 3 years. And it made sense because their albums had so many great singles that there were like six singles from Cyndi Lauper's debut album. We don't get that anymore in the way that the digital has changed things, where these were physical singles. These were being played on the radio. And to your point, I think it was great because just like with Whitney Houston, you had I Want to Dance with Somebody, you had all of these other songs that just gave you something different and made you fall in love with him even more. And also respecting the vocals because vocal delivery in both of those songs, both of those artists, completely
Yeah.
different. We got to enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you compare Whitney Houston's first two albums or two big 80s albums along with Cindy's two albums, Time After Time and Girls Just Want to Have Fun were the two big hits. And you think of Whitney's first one, and it was How Will I Know? And, Saving All My Love for You. You think of those two, and you think the second one, you think True Colors and Change of Heart. And then Whitney was I Want to Dance with Somebody. And didn't we almost have it all? Yeah, but you think of like how it's like dance song, ballad, and how both those artists did that.
And that is still something that even around the late 90s and early
Yeah.
2000s, with like the MTV TRL crowd, the Britney Spears, the Christina Aguileras, where they also would go, you'd have Baby One More Time, then you'd have Sometimes. You'd have Every Time, and then you'd have Toxic. So
Yeah.
they gave you that kind of up and down to give you something a little bit different. And also, it's a smart marketing move. You're being played on other radio stations. Your song is a little bit older. Maybe they need something new. Then you go, here's a different song that fits that. Here, play it, and then find a new crowd, make money. That's what they do.
And then let's go one more thing for She's So Unusual. I got the
Oh,
album here. I got it signed by Cindy. I forgot that I met her. It was so long ago. It's not even on Google, but this is a photo from us. Let's see where it'll glare. Yeah,
that's amazing.
at Tower Records. Probably early 2000s is when it happened. But I'm looking forward to this tour. Let's talk a little bit about True Colors first, that album, and then we'll talk a little bit about the tour. I remember when the song came out, it was so different and it had her unique voice. It was very different than the ballads that I listened to. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized it was such an LGBTQ plus anthem. Talk a little
Mm.
bit about the impact of that song, not just in pop culture, but for the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, I think one of the brilliant things of many that Cyndi Lauper had was her ability to write lyrics that weren't so just out there in your face as to what it is. She puts effort. I mean, we could go back to the first album with like She Bop, where so many people were like, "What's that song about?" And one of the co-writers, Steve Lunt, is one of my friends who I've interviewed with his work with Britney Spears. But he said, when you write songs, you go, okay, you can make it as topical as this. I feel sad, do whatever. But when you have those emotions in you, you try to find a way to make it special to you, but also special to the listeners. With True Colors, she was able to create something, and many people in the community did not know what that song was about. And now, of course, there are going to be like 100 million people that are like, I knew what it was from day one. Not when you saw people's reactions to the song back in the day, reviews of the song. You really didn't have that many people that knew what it was about. But what was amazing is the melody, the sonics of it drew you in, the lyrics kept you there. And knowing that you and I can grow old with this song and it means something different is special in a song. We could have songs that we fell in love with when we were 4 or 5 years old, and it means something at that moment. Then when you're 15, something different. Then when you're 50, something completely different. True Colors having that ability to, and this is at the time where you had, just the AIDS crisis, and
Yeah.
I'll use air quotes where no one was saying the right word or this or that. It was gay cancer, this and everything. The other thing too is if somebody said this song is for my community or Boy Blue written for a member of her chosen family that had passed, you just go, at the time, would people be allowed to say all those exact words that they wanted to?
Yeah.
Or like Shebop, you put it in there, let the people that know what's talking about, in our community, the LGBT community, there were so many different words, or you would wear your shirt this way, or you'd have this scarf, where things weren't said, but they were known. And I
Yeah.
think this song fit that because it connected with people and outside of the LGBT community, you know what I mean? And I think the brilliance of what she did was create something that we can appreciate it then and now and really appreciate what she put out there of herself. All these songs were special to her. And
Yeah.
when she sings it, it's still special today.
Yeah. No, well, 100%. And I think too, if you're an older fan, you might know these things. You know, if you went and saw the documentary, you might know that she had a lesbian sister, that she had a gay neighbor that was basically, you know, raising her, that, you know, this was her community. It wasn't something that she was pandering to. It was, you know, she changed legislation for the homeless youth, the issue that's going on, and overwhelmingly, you know, LGBTQ plus. Like, this has always been part of her life. It's not something like, oh, I know I can sell more records if I do this, which other artists sometimes get accused of, you know, doing things just in June or, you
Hmm.
know, the
Oh yeah.
community. And if you saw Madonna and you've, you know, known her since the 80s and the 90s, you know, she's done something similar. And if you saw the last tour, you saw her Live to Tell, where she, you know, takes a moment for the AIDS crisis, and, you know, these people that were her friends, with people that she came up with, and especially recognizing these two artists of like what they did together. And I always hated that they pitted the two of them against each other
Hmm.
because they have similar backgrounds. I wish they could have had a duet at some point.
Yep. Well, and that's the whole thing. It goes back to the media side of it, where
Yeah,
you can't have one woman succeed and another woman succeed. You have to say one is better than the other. You have to choose this. That media was heavy with that in the 80s and the 90s, early 2000s. Still continues on. Now it's become the fan bases. If you give props to Cyndi Lauper doing this, they're like, oh, but this other female artist is better, or she does this and that. And it's like, it's over the top. But what I think is amazing in this documentary, which I will say, the documentary does some things great, and I think it does some things a disservice. I think with the documentary, so many more people are going to know that she was involved in legislation. She was involved in this, and most people might not know what that was about. And she was basically saying, choose to be whatever you want to be, but don't take public funding and say, we're getting that public help, but we're going to choose which public we're helping. And she's
yeah,
like, no, no, no. If you're taking this, if you're benefiting from the government, and everyone watched the documentary for the fuller part of it, but in the Reader's Digest version, she says, if you're getting these benefits, if you're allowed to be this way, you should not be allowed to tell somebody, no, you cannot help them. If there's a homeless child outside of your, let's say, church, and they need a place to stay, and you have a place to stay, you cannot turn them down because you're benefiting from the government. You're being able to run as this entity, but you can't let your religion dictate who you can help out if you're getting help from the government. And I'm doing a disservice to how it is, but when you hear it from her words and explain it, it's amazing. And I think that part, many people are going to be surprised with that she was not. You and I both know there's a lot of celebrities that show up just to take that photo and leave. She was there in a hearing. She was there as an active participant in this. And some people can say, "Oh, she's an advocate." It's no, she's been an advocate, but
yeah,
more importantly, she's helped people that she knew, that she was
yeah,
not pandering. To your point, nowadays you can pander. Oh, it's Pride Month. Let me throw a remix out there and throw a gay artist in there. They're not going to be involved in the making of the album or song, but we'll do
yeah.
it then. This is like she's like everyone I know has somebody, including myself, with a member of the community, and they're no different. So let's stop treating them differently. And the sad part is everything about Cyndi Lauper was Madonna's better than Cyndi. Cindy's better than Madonna. You didn't have many of those moments where she was allowed to shine on her own with what she did, where you can physically see her doing these things. And I think it was great that they brought this up. I hope more people get to respect that part of her while
Yeah.
she's still alive. That's the other part. This happened while she's still alive. So I think it's a brilliant moment.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think this tour is going to be like? Do you think it's going to be a very retro tour? Because, you know, what we get to learn too from the documentary is that, you know, she had these two albums. She kind of struggled with finding her sound. She did, you know, a blues album. She did a pop album, a dance album. She, you know, went to Broadway, and became very successful there with Kinky Boots. But her career wasn't just, you know, okay, we're going to go there. It's going to be all 80s hits, or it's going to be this. Like, what do you think this show is going to be like?
I think if it's really, let the canary sing, then it's basically she's just going to show you all facets of who she is. Of course, there's going to be a lot of love given to that debut album. And I think she's going to do some of the deep cuts too, because I think she realizes these audiences love not just the one song, they love these albums. Each album was so sonically different But I feel like when you have artists nowadays that can say section one is going to be from this album, section two, section three, section four is going to be here. I think that's something that is going to be amazing for her because she still has a great voice. Also, she's so versatile that you go, do I do a Kinky Boots song? Do I do, At Last? Do I do, Boy Blue? What do I do to give everyone everything? And I think I always appreciate the fact that she knows herself, she knows her audience. So I think we're going to get a career spanning tour. And I
Yeah.
think there's going to be a lot of surprises that are going to happen because I think she can finally look back and appreciate and just sit back and go, I did that.
Yeah.
There's so much modesty and it's great and everything. But few times you get to have these artists go, this is my songbook. This is what I did. Thank you. And it's the connection because these artists always say, I created the song. Once we released it, it's yours.
Yeah.
That she can say, everyone, you may have only known me from 83. You may have only known me through Kinky Boots. This is the breadth of who I am. I think she's going to show us truly why she is the one and only Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, I mean, I had done an interview with Taylor Dana. It was last year or 2 years ago, and she was saying that the one thing that she learned from Cyndi Lauper was don't do the dance track as the fight. Like people kind of wait for that big track, like let's leave with "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," and that's like our exit song. She always does that before the encore and does True Colors, and that's like how she ends the show. And I feel like she's going to do a real big for Girls Just Want to Have Fun, maybe a little something at the beginning, maybe something before the end, and just give us that True Colors message because I feel like that's just like the one song that defines her career. And she wants to leave everybody with that message of acceptance, that, what that song means to so many people. And I feel like that's how she's going to end the show.
I agree, and I think it's such a brilliant love letter for her performing it to the fans of hers. I see you, I feel you, you're with me. And I think what a brilliant way to end a tour, a concert where everyone leaves feeling so good and uplifted. Because you don't want, Brink or anything like that at the end, last song. You're just like, but you remember at the end, it's tying that bow of just, here's the curtain call. This is the song that I know means a lot to you as it does to me. Let's share in this together. And this is how we end the night. And I think it's just bravo to that. I agree with you. I think there's no other place she could put it, but it's Cyndi Lauper. She could do something where you're like, I didn't this makes sense. Do you know what I mean? That's who she is. She's a
Yeah, I
genius.
mean, one of the things I think that people, I hope over time get to respect between, and see, here I am talking about Madonna and Cyndi Lauper at the same time, but where Madonna's albums weren't always like, here's the same thing for the last time, that she experimented with sounds. And sometimes you have those fans that are like, I don't like this album, or this one was better, or just play these hits. And you see something similar in Cindy's career because she easily could have become just a throwback artist and played festivals and whatnot, in the early 90s. And, she could have paid the bills and had that career, but she wanted to change her sound. She wanted to have more things to say about herself and professionally and artistically. And I just love the way that she like didn't take a straight path. That I think if you've been a fan since day one, or that you've always been a fan of hers, that you followed her through this journey. Like, hey, I got into blues music because of Cyndi. Maybe I went to go see my first show in theater because of Cyndi. Maybe, I went back and looked at these 80s records. I wasn't born in the 80s, but I did it because I was a fan of her other work. Like, I just love that it can kind of expand your mind if you follow an artist and their own journey.
100%. And I think what is amazing with Cyndi Lauper and that many people learn in the documentary is she was an active participant in her career. She was writing songs, she was creating melodies, she was producing. And also her voice had no limit, which was great and not great because then she's like, well, let me just try this. And she could do it and do it well. But then people are like, wait, but when a huge chunk of your base is like, no, we want more dance music, just go, let's go with dance. And then you go, let me just go ahead and do these, like, let's say covers, or you know what I mean? Like she
Yeah.
showed you Patti LaBelle giving her props for her singing, for her vocal skills. One of the biggest boisterous voices of all time, Patti LaBelle, is saying Cyndi Lauper can sing. That should tell you something. And I think part of that too is during the 90s, so many of these artists were transitioning into figuring out where do we stand in a music, that where it's grunge, where it's rap, where do we stand? And you look back at a lot of those 80s artists, many of them didn't make it to the 90s,
Yeah.
career-wise. Cyndi Lauper's like, well, I like to sing. Let me try this. I like this. And then later in her career, I want to write a musical. Let me do this. Because her voice and her talent had no limits. There were no
Yeah.
limitations, which worked for her and worked against her. Because for her, she was like, I loved what I was doing. But if you're looking at the numbers, to your point, if you're looking at the numbers, some of those albums didn't sell well, but they could be critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
Her brilliance is in the ability to use her voice in so many different mediums and be successful and do it successfully for decades. And now with that new musical coming, it's just going to be more accolades coming through for her.
Yeah. I mean, it's this tour starting in October. December 5th is when it's coming to the United Center. And I really hope that, maybe your 80s fans that are just like, hey, I know these two albums, these are the songs I want to hear. I want to celebrate her as an artist, get to see these other parts. And maybe back in the day they didn't pick up, the other albums. And it's like, hey, let me give those another listen. Let me go ahead and do this and respect her as an artist while she's still here. Because I feel like this kind of happens at those moments when an artist has passed and then, oh, they had this album and this song is so great. And then this song goes viral. Like we get to appreciate those moments while the artists are still here.
100%. And I think that's the great thing about her. Like when we talk about other artists, where so many of these great artists have passed before we got, a big farewell of whatever kind it was. And I
Yeah.
look at Cyndi Lauper going, I never wanted to do a documentary. Here it is. This is what it's at. Here's the celebration of my debut album. Here's a tour, and I'm going to be done. And just leaving on her own terms, leaving in a way that she wants to leave it as an artist. And I think what's great is all through these years, I was going to say all through the night, all through these years, that Cyndi Lauper has been able to see the love of the fans online for this
Yeah.
song, that song. Other songs were charting again. I think her going back through and going, wow, the music that I've made, even if it wasn't a platinum seller, still connected with people. So when I want to celebrate this, she may say, you know what? Let me do this song. I wanted this song to be a single, and it was never a single. Here it is, giving, each a moment. I do think we're going to get an evolution of her tour where there's going to be songs added in, maybe special guests, because I think she has touched so many different generations of people that I think she also knows how iconic it was when we got to see her and Patti LaBelle together, or we got to see this artist with that other artist. I think there are so many artists that love Cyndi Lauper, and if she's saying this is her last tour, there's going to be a lot of people wanting to see her because they know how important she was to them, to the community, and the music industry. And that's
Yeah.
amazing.
You're going to get a Billy Porter popping up on stage at some point. Patti LaBelle. I didn't number one, Patti LaBelle in the documentary that many times was not on my bingo card for 2024, but she's probably going to pop on stage with her at some point too. Maybe a We Are the World. There might be some point where we get a little bit of that, or at least maybe just like maybe a video interlude or something.
Well, and it's like you have her and you have Billy Porter who are talking about the singing, the skill set that Cyndi Lauper has. And I think Billy Porter was the one who said, a white girl singing like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like she has so much soul in her voice. And when you learn through the documentary, she lived many lives. She
Yeah.
had ups and she had downs, and she took that with her as she carried it through life. And I think when she sings, you genuinely get that soul because I think she's singing from a place like, if this is my last breath, it's going to be a song, it's going to be words that I'm saying. And I think that's one of those amazing things. And I think we'll get those other people. I mean, if Billy Porter does not pop, if Patti LaBelle does not pop up, I'm gonna be so mad. But whatever they want to do, whatever they want to do, I just think it would be a special moment because
Yeah.
we know that these other people, we know we as fans love her and her career. It's
Yeah.
amazing when you get to hear these artists that were before her. Patti LaBelle wasn't her contemporary. Patti LaBelle was an icon by the time, you know what I mean? By the time Cyndi
Yeah.
Lauper came out. Billy Porter, his career took off after, She's So Unusual. And I think that's great showing two different generations right there in those two people. And they were talking extensively. To your point, it wasn't she's great. Next. You know what I mean? Next. She
Yeah.
has a nice dress. Next. It wasn't anything like that. And I think that was the connection that she's made with everyone. And I hope that those in the community, music industry, everything, wants to pay respects to her, see the show, be a part of the show if she asks you, because I think she's important and we need to honor these great creatives, these great advocates, these great women while they're still alive. Give them the flowers while they're here on their grave.
Let's talk a little bit about We Are the World, because if you grew up in the 80s, if you were a kid in the 80s, it was a message of unity. There's also another documentary about that, how that song was made, and just like the craziness of getting all those artists together, but having, even if you're not watching the video and you hear just the song, when Cindy's part comes on. I mean, talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that, because I feel like there's going to be at least maybe the music video is going to be played, or her part. Like, it was such a big thing, back in the mid 80s.
Yeah, and I think that was what I loved is that she was just happy to be there. When you see the footage, she was
Yeah.
just happy to be there. And then you, of course, hear, and this is something that people talked about for decades. When I started interviewing these songwriters, producers, and everyone, I was like, remember, don't wear too much jewelry because the microphone is going to pick it up. Because in there, they're like, Cyndi, we're getting some feet. What's going on? And she's like, what? I don't know. And like, it's your jewelry. She's like, oh. And you just see this is just somebody who's enjoying being in the moment,
Yeah.
and that's why, like with her, there was no airs. She was singing next to these other people that she talked extensively about loving their music, their career. And you know her voice. And when they said, we want her, we want this person, that person, it made sense because it was the icons at the time that
Yeah.
were the moment,
Yeah.
and but also it was to be able to distinctly hear Cyndi Lauper's voice, that that's Cyndi Lauper, and it wasn't somebody trying to sound like Cyndi Lauper, and it wasn't her trying to sound homogenous with a group chorus.
Yeah.
When you see her just enjoying it, you see everyone. The fact that they put the egos at the door, they sang there, they were having a good time, and it was late. It was like it was like after one of the award shows or something, like where
Yeah. After the
they're just
Grammys.
like
Yeah.
they're just like, we have about 5 hours to do this. And then they just kept cycling in. And you just see them all trying to figure out how to make it work. While many of them were not used to singing in a studio with anybody else. Most of these artists were never studio singers with other artists. These, like Cyndi Lauper, all these people in the booth by themselves. So all of a sudden, when you go, wait, now you're with the cream of the crop, you're all singing together, there's that
Yeah.
intimidation factor that comes in. And just Cyndi, just when you look at her, she's enjoying being there. But also, once again, this goes on brand with who she is,
Yeah.
part of the community. It makes sense for her to be there because her name brought people to listen, to buy the album or to buy the single. But also, it's important because that goes with her, that goes with Bob Dylan, that goes with the message that all of these artists have had since day one, where it's we have more in common than not, and we need to embrace that. And that Greatest Night in Pop, that documentary, everyone watch it.
Yeah.
So good. And the
It
Bob
is.
Dylan part, Stevie Wonder.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. A musical, because she'd get into, we have Working Girl, and then we have Kinky Boots. I feel like this is a point where Let the Canary Sing, whether that's going to be the title or Girls Just Want to Have Fun, but I feel like a Cyndi Lauper musical is like in the works. I feel like a Madonna musical, a Cyndi Lauper musical, I feel like these things are kind of the next evolution after these two big tours that the two artists had.
I think so. I think that no matter what, whether Cyndi Lauper likes it or not, somebody's going to end up doing, whether it's 100 years down the line, somebody's going to end up doing a musical based on whether it's Cyndi Lauper's life or the music. I think, for me, I think that something that would work that most people would be like, what? Is if it were a Cyndi Lauper musical with brand new Cyndi Lauper songs, where it wasn't trying to make True Colors fit in there, where it was she's like, this is a story of me. Because in many of those songs, she's not the only songwriter, producer and everything in there. So I like the idea that, of course, there'd be the jukebox thing, but I also think she has the skill set more than most people to create, here's my life, and
Yeah.
these are the songs. And she talks about like having written songs early on, but Blue Angel, all these, the career before her solo career, that I think something so off the wall would be, let me do a musical about myself with brand new music. And people would be like, that doesn't make sense. But nothing she has ever
Yeah.
done has made sense to people right
Yeah.
off the bat. And she has that talent to make it work because you can't predict what she's going to do. So that's why I said something like that seems
Yeah.
more to me that would happen first, then there could be a great show with all of her music in there. I also feel like I don't want it to get swallowed up by just going, here's a jukebox musical, because they're trying it so much lately and it's not working as well as some of those artists thought.
Yeah.
But I think she could do something that's so unusual, just creating a story about herself, but with brand new music. I think that would be the genius of it.
Yeah, I mean, she talked in her Tony Award winning speech that her mom had Broadway albums that she listened to a ton. You know, she's involved in the community right now. So I can only assume that there's new material that's coming out to maybe have some of those other iconic songs play. But to your point, we're going to get some new music. So maybe, you know, this is the end of this pop career and a farewell tour, you know, in this part. But I feel like even at 70, and that's what I love too about getting older, is that sometimes you have these ideas that, well, this has to end because you're this age, or, you know, you should slow down because of this age. And seeing these artists 65, 70 still going strong and coming out with new ideas, like, I love that. And I can only imagine that, like, 20, 30, 40 years from now, how that's just going to become the norm, that people aren't going to say, like, well, 65, you know, before it was like,
Yep.
you're 65, that's it, just
Retired,
go on
you're
vacation.
gone.
Yeah. Get out. Now it's like, let's see what's next. I love it.
Well, and that's why I feel like she is a creative. She's always been.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine her sitting through 2+ years of production on a musical with songs from 40 years ago. She's creative. She's going to want to keep creating things. Who knows? She could create a symphony, an orchestra. She can do whatever she wants, but knowing that she's still in that creative mindset, I think is a brilliant thing, because creativity doesn't slow down because you get older. So towards the end of, what they would say the end of her career, I don't see her sitting down because these musicals aren't just done in a matter of, a week, a month. They always have to find the venue, then funding, all that stuff before all this stuff starts. But I
Yeah.
think she has it within her that she still has a story to tell. And
Yeah.
maybe it's not just her own story. Maybe she can go, okay, I'm going to take, The Great Gatsby, which is already out there, but The Great Gatsby, and make music based on that. That creativity still helps. Her
Yeah.
revisiting some of those might not. But I love the fact that the energy she has today in that documentary is no different than the energy from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think we still have a lot of energy from Cyndi Lauper coming our way.
Yes, of course. And then go ahead and check out the tour. It's going to start in October. It's heading all through the U.S. Who knows? There might be a second leg of the tour as well too. But definitely go check her out, because you never know with these farewell greatest hits tours, how long they're actually going to last. Share Elton John. But this could be it, and then she can move on and announce the next project. In January, February. Sometime in the spring. And then she has that documentary, Let the Canaries Sing, which is just a fantastic look on her life. Because sometimes you just hear an artist on the radio, or, you might have an LGBTQ plus friend or relative who talks about this artist all the time, and you may not understand the importance or their impact for, 4 decades. So it's great to just kind of go back and take a look to be like, wow, this person had such a huge impact. And this is why myself, my friends, my partner, my neighbor, whoever it might be, really loves this artist because of how much they mean to so many people on so many different levels.
Hmm. I love it. And hey, everyone, I hope I see you all there at any of the show dates, and let us know what you think is going to be on that set list, because I'm going to be very excited. I'm intrigued
Yeah.
because I think she's in this mind space to create
Yeah.
something. So I'm excited to see what that is.
And the final thing I'll say, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to dress like how they normally dress. It's December in Chicago, so it's going to be, a little chilly, but there's going to be a lot of people. They're going to put some dye in their hair. They're going to bring out their 80s neon. They're going to bring out their red dresses. Like, a lot of people are going to get dressed up for the show. This is one of those shows that people are going to bring out they're going to let their
Oh, yes.
creativity. Yeah. Those outfits
Their
are
hair's
sitting
going
in
to
the
be
back of their
taller than
closet.
mine today. It's going to be
Yeah.
like all the way up a side pony, some
Yeah.
fun stuff. The neon colors can still be there under your parka. It'll be
Yeah.
just fine.
There you go. I have a couple of months to grow out my hair so I can do the side pony. So that's how we'll do that.
Just the one side. Make sure it's just the one side.
There you go. James, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh my God. Thank you again. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.